Hi, and good evening to Live from the View. This is the Community Arts of Bellevue's live show every Thursday night. We're so glad to have you join us with us tonight. My name is Kathleen O'Brien, and I'm on the board, and we're thrilled for a very, very special show here tonight. Normally, we talk about arts. We are talking about artists and all different types of things that tie to art, but we also like to bring to you things that have positive, meaningful impact to your lives. And there's been a lot of work done in the world with CBD. And we've got two experts here with us tonight, both who live in Nashville, who have done an awful lot of work in this field with great results and promising results for so much more. So we're going to just jump into it. If you've got questions, please use the chat room. We've got Will Tarleton, who's an extraordinary agriculturalist and is so well informed on this topic. And then Dr. Annabelle Morgan, a scientist who has done an awful lot of work, and I can't wait for you to hear what she's accomplished so far in her young life of work. It's amazing. I'm so hopeful for what this can do for my generation and generations to come. So please let me introduce you to Will Tarleton and Dr. Annabelle.
Hey, Kathleen, thanks for the introduction. I guess, Annabelle, do you want to start first? Or you want me to do a quick introduction and then?
You first for once.
All right.
I know it's usually ladies first, so you can go first today.
All right, great. Well, my name's Will Tarleton, and I actually grew up in Bellevue. Moved there in 1987, and spent a lot of my time in Nashville, and then went to school over in North Carolina, to a farm school over there, and then right between high school and going to college, I got an opportunity to travel out west for a little bit and see a little different part of the country, and met some great people out here, and communities that were at the time able to cultivate cannabis for their own self and medicine. And so I got exposed to a little bit of that, and communities that grew a lot of agriculture and food production as well involved with that. So between going out there and going into school in North Carolina, I finally found my way back to Tennessee. And around 2014, 2015, I was able to get involved into some of the first hemp pilot programs that we had for the state that were created after the 2014 Farm Bill that allowed states to develop their own independent hemp production programs within the Department of Agriculture. And since then, I've been on a couple of the trade associations, originally the Tennessee Hemp Industries Association, and now the Hemp Association of Tennessee, as well as participate in some of our lobbying efforts with the Tennessee Growers Coalition. And then right now working for myself with a few other partners in a company called Cannabis Supply. And we're basically help both the farmer and the consumer and some of the processors in a supply chain, help basically fulfill the supply chain needs of our industry with as much due diligence and involvement as we can to create safe products and help farmers and try to see this industry grow to its full potential beyond health and medicine, but also fiber and industry and plant-based industrial applications. So I'll do it for me, and I'll let you go, Dr. Annabelle.
Well, that's awesome. And Will's awesome. I will say that before I even get started. He is one of the first persons that I met when I decided to really get a deep dive into the cannabis industry in general. I met Will probably about 5 years ago now, and he can always call on me. I mean, we might go months without talking, but we both know we're kind of grinding in separate lanes. So I'm more on the medical scientific side of cannabis. And when we say cannabis, we're really, not just talking about marijuana, we're talking about hemp. Both come from, both are, considered cannabis. They are just different based on their profiles. So, we both work within cannabis, not just hemp, but of course our focus today is on CBD. which here in Nashville, you see a lot of CBD everywhere. So I'm a cell and developmental biologist. I've been in Nashville kind of back and forth since 2007, primarily in the Franklin area. I now live in Green Hills, and I am a graduate of Vanderbilt University. So at Vanderbilt, I was working a lot in the cardio oncology space, which is basically looking at chemos and chemotherapies and their offset effects, and how a lot of times it causes heart disease. So it was really not going anywhere near the lane of studying CBD and or cannabis. It is not something that ever came across our desk as a scientist because because of the federal regulations. So, but I had my third child. I'm a mom of 5. And I had my third child in 2016. His name is Macario, and we thought everything was fine, but he actually ended up having a stroke. I think it was like right at birth, but to this day, we don't know when, how, why. We just know he was foaming at the mouth and he was seizing uncontrollably. So he was having about 200 seizures a day. We rushed him back to Vandy, and, of course, I'm just leaving it in the hands of my colleagues. And Macario was in the hospital in ICU for 5 weeks, trying every drug regimen, and nothing worked. So they removed 40% of his brain at 5 weeks old. So, of course, with that much brain missing, we don't know the outcome. So, we just kind of went along with therapy. And when he turned 6 months old, he was no different than a newborn baby. So that's when I started looking into cannabis. And of course, there was such a gap in research. There was nothing I could even think of to buy because there was just not a lot of research in 2016. And this is probably right before CBD became as trendy as it is today. So long story short, I created a formula for my son utilizing CBD. And the choice was to just kind of go pure and use it as baseline formulation, and then try to, add or try different things if that didn't work. Well, that seemed to work. And was it the CBD alone? I don't know. I took him off seven medications, but I certainly will say that the CBD was the driver of my son now being 5 years old and having no developmental deficits. So we could talk more about that, but that has driven me to meet people like Will, who have really the mission to get this plant to people in a variety of ways, at the right quality, with standards behind it. And so I'm doing a lot. I'm consulting all over the world, running a lot of clinical trials, and really just focusing on how we can create specific cannabinoids or specific CBD formulas for specific conditions. So that's who I am. And I guess Will and I have kind of planned how we would do this. And I think Will, we always see in the cannabis industry the importance of seed to sale. And I think the confusion there is that, that means the same guy has to grow it and he has to do every step in between. But I think it means that it's really about a controlled process, meaning that I don't grow, I don't farm, I don't have a farm. But if I know that I need quality cannabinoids to run my studies, I know to call Will. And so to me, that's the meaning of seed to sale. And so I hand it over to you, Will, to kind of talk about, really the stigma of seeing CBD everywhere and understanding the differences and where it comes from. I mean, the importance of quality control and importance of growing it with knowledge.
Yeah, thanks, Annabelle, and so glad we have the opportunity to do an interview together. So obviously enjoy talking to you and your input and your efforts that you've put into our industry here in Tennessee and abroad. So thanks, and excited to do this with you. And yeah, I'll talk a little bit about that. So seed to sale, I think that's a great point starting off with, and I'll also start off with just reminding people that this is a plant that gets grown. There's a lot of other tech going on right now where people are even able to produce similar cannabinoids and things from yeast cultures and tissue cultures and things like that. So this industry's, the technology applications that have been involved in the industry probably over the last 10 years or more have been pretty far and beyond imagination. And it's just every day learning more about the process and the plant itself. And it's just a really enjoyable experience so far to be involved in it. And so what we're talking about, we see a lot of CBD, a lot of hemp-derived products in the market. And one thing that we do and really try to hold ourselves accountable to is really knowing the source of where products come from, being able to trace it back to the farm or to in some instances, what genetics were these? Where did they come from? What are the lineages behind that? And then what's another big piece of all this is along the supply chains, especially on the, the recreational side or the consumption side, human consumption side, the importance of getting real analysis done on products and material. Just as people may or may not know, but cannabis is a heavy feeder, which means that it sucks up a lot of things from the soil. It breaks down minerals in certain ways, and if it doesn't have one, then it starts searching out for others. So in some instances, you can see hemp being used as what is called a bioremediator, and that's a plant that's basically able to suck out certain metals or minerals, whether they're good or bad, and actually bring those out of the soil and into the plant matter itself. And in some ways, providing healthier soil than before, or just a plant that's able to even remove certain potential toxins that may exist in the soil that the plant's able to take up. So understanding that and how some of these plants and even your own vegetables, but we don't need to go into that for right now. But especially on hemp, we're in the CBD market space. If we're talking about a plant or molecules that potentially have persons who have compromised immune systems or health issues or seeking an alternative source of plant-based therapy or medicine, that you really want to know what else might be coming along with that. So when we talk about seed to sale tracking, it's really, if I go out to a farmer and he's got material that he's grown on his land and it looks really pretty and it looks clean and visually looks great, what I'm typically going to have to do is also get a what's called a COA, or a certificate of analysis. That's when you're sending this cannabis plant material or product off to, we use DEA certified facilities, laboratories that have gone through procedures and requirements to be able to analyze, different compounds and products. And so we have to actually take that product from the farmer, send it off to a lab, wait a few days, and what we're looking for initially is potency. So that's going to say, okay, is this hemp or is it not? We deal with hemp, so we know that we have to usually be below 0.3% Delta 9 THC in Tennessee, or 0.3% total THC in a lot of other states. So now we're kind of going to, what does that mean? 0.3% THC was developed, was sort of a number that was created 40 plus years ago with some international individuals that decided, hey, we have a place and a space for industrial hemp. We need to define it differently than cannabis THC that could get people high. Let's kind of do some, let's throw out a number and decide, okay, if it's below 0.3%, it's hemp, you're not going to go to jail. If it's above, then, you might. So initially that's been the foundation and under policy for the last 40 plus years. So we go by that right now. And that's influence policy making. But for now, that's what it is, and that's with our farm bill. So federally, that's any plant that is grown and harvested that is tested by that each individual state's pilot program is determined at the time of harvest to be below 0.3% THC, then anything derived from that plant is technically federally legal. And there's some language in that I would encourage everyone to go review the Farm Bill 2014 or the Farm Bill 2018 under Section 7606. So basically what that gets us to is this, that not only is there sort of some ambiguity behind these testing potencies that we have to find out for ourselves out of our own pocket analytically from a certified lab, just to know, okay, is this a product I can sell? That's not going to get someone high. Then it's like, okay, well, if this product is for human consumption, then I probably need to make sure that it doesn't have any yeast or molds. I should probably test pesticides. I should also test heavy metals. And then if I really want to get groovy, I'll even see what kind of terpene profile is there and maybe some of the other cannabinoid profiles that are there. So all in all, just with this one test, I may end up spending $30 to $300 and getting a full panel analysis from a DEA certified lab to know that this product at this time, at this moment, with this one sample was what it is. And so carrying that along, I could go and say, okay, I've got a product now that I can sell, and it may be just the raw flower, and that may be available for someone's personal use, whether they use that in cooking or edibles, or maybe they ingest it through smoking. There's a lot of different ways to metabolize cannabinoids. And then the other way would be into a next processing stage where maybe what most industry would be extraction, where you'd have large volumes of raw flower or raw material that gets stripped of the resins and the cannabinoids and the fats and lipids and terpenes and everything that's in this flower. And then from there, you come out with sort of an oily goo that has all these wonderful properties in it. And then from there, you can go off and start stripping things away and isolating things out and having fun in the chemistry lab. And so after that, they may, then they're going to probably get tested once, twice, maybe 3 times more, made into some sort of product. That final product will get tested again, and that we know that what's in that bottle is what it is. And we'll go through the same test of, okay, I want to make sure there's no pesticides, no heavy metals, no pathogens, nothing harmful in here, that we just got pure unadulterated cannabinoids that are here for what they're supposed to be used for and can be consumed. Now, all of that part in Tennessee is not recommended, or we are not in a point where that is a regulated thing for us to do in this market. That's just, we do that because we understand that those are things we should be doing, and we see other legal states that do it, and we understand the importance of going through those stages to make sure that you're not getting someone high and you're not getting someone more sick than they may potentially already be. So that's, so when you go into the market and you see all these pictures of CBD this, CBD that, or Delta 8 that, it can be really confusing where to even start. And I would usually start by just the packaging and seeing, do they have an ingredients list? Do they have a QR code that shows me a COA? Do they have anything to back up what's actually in this? Now, these are steps that are pretty far and beyond most consumers, things that are in the market that consumers would typically be going, we don't do this for our tomatoes. We don't do this for our, meat or our canned goods or whatever else. But we understand this as the cannabis community as sort of the steps that are necessary in a, recreational market or medical market. And technically right now we have more of a recreational hemp cannabis market that exists in Tennessee. And we have a lot of oversight right now necessary to allow that to happen in a safe way. Obviously there's parts of it that could be better, and I hope they will be. But right now we've got some pretty cool, dedicated employees, state employees, people working hard every day to try to see that this is a successful program and really benefits the people and farmers and industry in a positive, meaningful way. And that's just the CBD, cannabinoid part of it. That's not even discussing the potentials for fiber or plastics or wood byproducts or all the other amazing things that this, just this plant can do, not to mention other plants can do. So
and I know,
I'll
and
slow
not to
down there.
interrupt you, Will, but
No, that's good.
I'm super interested. Like before I even start talking about, well, you made a ton of points that I want to touch on, but I'm super interested in obviously the other uses of hemp, which the claim is there's like 50,000 uses, everything from making concrete and fibers, and there's just so many different benefits, even without the cannabinoids. There's fats and all that that can benefit our health. So do we have the right type of, agriculturally, are we in the right place? Because I know in Canada, I am Canadian, by the way, so I know in Canada, they're really taking advantage of utilizing other parts of the hemp plant other than, they're federally legalized in cannabis, so they're using that for mostly the cannabinoids. But then in the hemp space, especially in Saskatchewan, where I'm from, which is like the land of farming, I'm seeing a lot of people take advantage of the fiber. So do we live in a place where, we can grow hemp for those reasons as well, really well?
Yeah, we do, and geography really matters when it comes to setting up more of the industrial infrastructure. And our state motto is agriculture and commerce. A lot of our land, middle to west Tennessee, is nice and flat, big open, and has some similar commodity agriculture aspects that would fit in line with a proposed scalable hemp fiber or hemp grain or hemp industrial use project. We have a lot of wood in Tennessee as well, and forestry is big for our state. And there's probably some quite a bit of land that could use some rotation out of our typical cotton, soy, wheat, corn commodities, which are great commodities, but they could probably be diversified quite a bit with this. And so when you look at it from like a state planning, a land use planning aspect, and like a rural development mindset, I just don't think we've seen the engagement that we'd like to see on this, because the CBD space and the other cannabinoid space is just a lot more starry-eyed and looks good to other people. So we haven't really been able to convince them that, hey, now's the time to do it. We have car manufacturers in our own state right now that actually are importing hemp products into their vehicles that could all be grown here in Tennessee. And to give you just like a brief idea of numbers, you're looking at probably around 2,500 to 5,000 acres to get a fiber operation going. That probably would take $10 to $20 million just off the cuff of infrastructure, and work out your typical county to county deals and your economic planning, all that aside. And what I'm also seeing is it's not so much something that has to be centralized either. So you could take a place that had a facility, and with 100 miles of that facility could probably take in, a few farmers' crops and be able to make something happen of it. Obviously, for any kind of economic big push like that, you do your due diligence and really try to map it out and make sure that it all makes sense. But from the last 7 or 8 years and looking into this, that seems to be sort of the area that it would need to be to really make something happen. And we're seeing it here happening already. There's businesses in the Southeast, in Kentucky and Tennessee, making flooring that's made from hemp composites. We're seeing people able to convert some of the plant material actually into a graphene type structure that is similar to being able to be used in like superconductors and batteries. So you're seeing just some really cool technology come out of this, and a plant-based, a push for more plant-based industrial inputs that aren't going to have to come all from petrochemical, distillation or whatever,
Right.
what they do in plastics and oil. I mean, I'm actually right here in California for the week, and a friend of mine's been working on a project where they're actually growing, making packaging out of mushrooms and hemp fibers that
Amazing.
decomposes in 6 to 9 months. So there's, just stuff like that that's really great on the plant-based side.
That's so great. And you would think that we would take advantage of that as a state. I really hope we do, because I know that for farming, this is obviously an amazing place. But like you said, I mean, CBD is just, it's taken over that conversation, because I guess from an investment standpoint, the investor is going to get a return a lot quicker than putting that much into so much infrastructure. So yeah, I'd love to talk to you about that when you get home. Just to shift a little bit and to talk about what you said in regards to a COA, which is the certificate of analysis, and how a consumer has to do their due diligence. And I always think that it's silly to have to do that, because we don't do it, like you said, for bananas and oranges and tomatoes. And but I kind of just feel that way about the nutraceutical space in general, that you don't really know what you're getting. And even more so in the CBD space, there's such a diversity of supposed benefits, right? I mean, you can literally Google CBD benefits and find wheels that show you all of the benefits, everything from, cancer to fibromyalgia to sleep, and then all the way to, it can help your dog too. And, and it's safe for your babies. And that's great, right? Not to knock the recreational side at all. But I just think it's maybe just an overgeneralization and excitement for the plant, because what I've found in, the cannabis space, coming from a very conservative Vanderbilt background, where everything, when we're writing papers, every single word matters. I mean, every out, every in, I mean, every single detail is so important. And then you come to the cannabis industry or the hemp industry on the scientific side is just, let's generalize everything. Well, this is CBD. So, you have anxiety, so use this. You have sleep, use this. Your mom has cancer, give her this. Probably just give her a little more than you're taking. And, and part of it is very true, right? Part of it is very possible that, because what CBD does is so different than any other medicine. Most medicines are created to target the actual problem. So most medicines are created, if you have a headache, aspirin targets the pathways that create headaches. So it's specifically, in the pathway for pain. And if you have, hyperthyroidism, there's a certain medicine specifically for that. CBD is not specific to anything unless it's formulated to be. CBD focuses on balance throughout the body, literally from head to toe. The endocannabinoid system literally just plays alongside and with and intertwines with our nervous system. And so it's not directly impacting anything. I like to call it drinking water when you're dehydrated. It's really just coming in like a catalyst and saying, hey, you cells, go do this. And hey, you cells, you express that. Very different from THC, that's actually going to, like a lock and key, actually create change. CBD is more of taking care of the environment and encouraging processes to happen. That's why you can take CBD and be like, I'm taking this for my headache. And then you're like, oh man, I've had acid reflux. And this is true. I've heard people say stuff like this. I've had acid reflux for 6 months and it's gone. That's what the CBD actually did for me. And so when you're focused on balance, and that's why it's so good for wellness. And that's why somebody that utilized it for healing my son with who's missing 40% of his brain, I had to take a step back and look and say, well, geez, I mean, there's a whole nutraceutical, recreational health and wellness market for CBD. And then I go and look out there and I'm like, oh, well, the problem is exactly what Will said is, there are COAs that are duplicated just so people can sell it. People are making them literally out of their kitchen. I mean, I've heard and I've actually seen, and it's just not safe, so it's not that the CBD isn't safe. It's just that when you're using solvents, you have to know what you're doing, and you have to provide tests, and sometimes companies will like spend so much money on packaging and marketing, and they're not spending money on hiring appropriate expertise and assuming that they are experts in every part of this field. And I won't stand up for 5 seconds against somebody like Will when it comes to the agricultural side, but he can't get in the scientific boardroom with me. So it's understanding your place. So on the recreational side, the nutraceutical side, I see a difference amongst products that can be used for wellness. I think when it comes to CBD in the medical space, because everybody's, there's a whole nother level to this. Everyone's taking it for, the more day-to-day things like anxiety or sleep, which when they aren't at an emergency level, I call that supplementation. But then when we get to the medical side, it's important for us to understand that it's not just the CBD alone. It's not just the THC alone. They are not substances. They are compounds. And so as when they are created into substances like capsules and tinctures, that they become a part of a driver that can actually impact specific causes. So a lot of our research now is focusing on how we can actually specify different formulations, put them in studies so that we can say, oh, you have fibromyalgia. Well, this one's backed by studies and this one's good for you. So there's a question. Will, you want to read that?
Yeah. Can you tell us about the different dosages of CBD tincture? 500 versus 1,000 versus 1,500 milligrams is what I would assume they're referencing there.
So I'll start because, and Will, you already know the answer to this. So you're probably thinking milligrams, and the first question is it isolate or is it spectrum or is it broad distillate? And the differences of those is, full spectrum, you have literally, terpenes, and you have other cannabinoids, which there's like 130 cannabinoids, which CBD and THC are cannabinoids at different levels, right? So that's either 500 total CBD or 500 total cannabinoids. And that's if it's a spectrum product. There's distillate products where they remove specific cannabinoids. So, especially here in Tennessee, a lot of times people feel safer if there's no THC. So that could be 500 milligrams of a spectrum without the THC, right? And the differences of the dosages are really just how much of it is diluted in that. If it's an oil, which you asked tincture, how much of it is diluted per tincture. So, and Will, if you want to add to that.
No, that's good. I mean, it's really, it's funny too. It's once you get into this, you're like, oh yeah, metric system. How does all this work? And so it is. Those are great questions to be asking when you are looking at a product. And then on top of that is, do you really need a 1,500 milligrams? What's too much, or what, not necessarily too much that it's going to be harmful, but what's, your body can only absorb so much at a time. So, and so, yeah, that's all I'll add with that.
Yeah. And I would say one more thing, because, that understanding how much of potency you can absorb or you may need is really difficult. I mean, there's no real answer to that right now. But that just, to me, it just dials back to quality. If you're looking at the shelf and you're like, hey, what will I need? I mean, it's a lot easier with a THC product to figure out what it does for you because you'll get high. But with a CBD product, it is actually kind of the same. It just takes longer to figure it out. for people to really figure out like what is best for them, because we are all different. So
Yeah.
Kathleen had another question posted here. I'll read that because I think you're going to be the best to answer it, Will.
Right.
What can we do to help gain more political support for additional research and more eased laws?
So for me, that's a really easy one. It's engage in your civic duty to vote and represent your interest as a citizen of the state, and focus on your local levels. Federal's great, but locals, you can get a lot more done, I feel like, just here. And the message can be amplified by those around you that share the same views or feelings. So we do have two organizations that I would recommend in our state. That would be the Hemp Association of Tennessee. That's our trade association. And then you have the Tennessee Growers Coalition. That is a political action committee that has done a lot of the work to get our hemp program to where it is today. Other than that, it's finding out your district representative. For Bellevue, it's going to be District 20, I believe. There may be some parts of Bellevue that are split. I can't recall, but I know it's District 20. So that would be the one to engage with your local representatives. Say, hey, I want eased laws on cannabis, and I want to see more research. A lot of the Tennessee state universities are also doing some research on the hemp side, on agriculture, on fibers, on a number of different things. So that's another way to support the research, is to support some of the land grant universities and their efforts.
Awesome answer. There's another one here. What is the difference between CBD used for sleep, CBD used to focus, CBD used for medical, and so on? Or does it just affect everyone differently? So I think I touched on that a little bit. So we can go to the spectrum. So I'll use my son as an example. What I gave him was an isolate of CBD, and it was CBD alone. And the reason being is because I'm from this scientific background where I need to know exactly what I'm giving somebody, the exact dose, because if I don't know, what went wrong or what went right. And I was taking a huge chance on my own child's brain. But we do have some knowledge now on different cannabinoids, and hemp is not only abundant in CBD, sometimes it's abundant in CBG, CBN, and it could be co-abundant with the CBD. And certain cannabinoids like CBG is great for inflammation, so it can help CBD drive that inflammation. CBN is great for sleep, and so that can help. I mean, some people think CBN is way better than melatonin. There are some formulas that companies will add melatonin with CBN. It's really difficult because, the research isn't all the way there. So it's really tough to give a fixed answer. And we've always been told as experts in the space not to make any claims. But the truth is we are becoming a little more clever on it. And there are certain spectrums and derivatives of the plant that we can start, really predicting what they're going to be good for. I mean, I think the cannabis industry is getting a lot better at that with their different strains, and which ones make you happy versus which ones help you go to sleep. So the difference is really, within the profile of that substance, right? So like sometimes companies will put CBD for focus or CBD for anxiety, and that doesn't mean that they're right. Again, that you have to do your research and see if they at least have some information to help back up that claim.
Yeah, and just to remind our people listening this or viewing it is, we all have our endocannabinoid system. That's an actual physical thing that's in our body, and everyone processes and metabolizes these compounds at different rates and different speeds, just like we do with food. So there is some good research and anecdotal evidence out there on, like Dr. Annabelle said, with CBN for sleep. There's another compound called CBG that seems to be a little more lighter and maybe a little more focused, but it's really just, what's really nice is that you're not going to overdose on any of this.
Right.
And to always start small, and basically what's going on with its relationship to inflammation or anti-inflammation benefits is that at one point there was a lot of cannabis growing wild, perhaps, and other cannabinoids being produced in other plants, and that this is something that exists naturally in environments around the world that our bodies adapted to somehow to allow itself to benefit through anti-inflammation, focused on the neurological aspects of our bodies. So we and a lot of people have to be and now we're in this paradigm where we have to be worried about THC, we have to be worried about things like failing a drug test for THC, and okay, is this THC metabolite that was found in a sample at a drug test? Is it someone who smokes every day and is on their job, stoned and not doing a good job, or is this someone who's at home using it at appropriate time as a responsible person and still involving themselves with it? So there's other. We actually tried to push a bill this session that would allow for the allowable limits of THC to be raised a bit to allow for people who were taking CBD products that had micro dose amounts of THC in them that might build up over time that would maybe make them fail a drug test, even though they're not someone who's doing it at work or whatever. So
right.
And that's a lot of the more of the science part that in education that we're trying to bring to light on where this prohibition period has gotten us and prevented us from even moving forward or staying back or whatever. And there's a lot of different layers to where we are today in this post prohibition period of cannabis in general, and all the other issues that come awry with it. Social justice issues is a big one for me that I'd like to see really pushed if we see any kind of real medical or cannabis legislation go through. I also hope some nonviolent offenders who've gotten mixed up in simple possession or whatever, who are just kind of caught up in the system, just are able to move on with their lives from being wrecked by that. So, and that's getting off a little bit, but just just for people to understand, the other layers that go into how we're having to sort of navigate ourselves through policy that is also based on, not completely founded scientific basis.
That's right. So there's another question. Is CBD also used topically, like in skincare? And I mean, huge yes, right? And there's actually some data coming out. I mean, topically for pain, how it's so beneficial. It's like, I can't remember the name of the pain cream that everybody buys. That's like, but it's
the
so
Tiger Balm.
Yeah, going back to formulations again, CBD can work within many different formulas and really enhance them, right? So we're finding that in pain, I'm actually doing a lot of studies in pain, and we're finding that topically that CBD is really beneficial, both at the spectrum and the isolate level. And then in skincare, I've heard tons of anecdotal benefits for, kids that have facial issues, acne, all the way to psoriasis and all these things. And just for hydration, right? Just even for day-to-day hydration, there's companies making bath bombs and Epsom salts and all of these things. And at the end of the day, CBD is going to combat our inflammatory processes, right? So I think that should help people kind of feel better about the confusion that we are all different. And but with any disease, any condition, even sometimes with headaches alone, I mean, we all have inflammation that needs to go away, and it's all different in everybody, right? And so that's why if Will uses the exact same formula that I use, it might take my headache away, but for him, it might help him sleep better. Because really, I just like to say that CBD really, it's almost like it senses what your body needs, because it's just clearing the space and allowing for those things to happen. Because if you reduce inflammation, processes can actually, cells can communicate, and things can just, your body can act how it wants to. We have an internal defense mechanism that just needs to be, given a little push sometimes. So CBD can absolutely do that. So I know it's confusing at times, but that's why everybody kind of has to find what is most suitable for them in the current state that we're in.
And I'll also add, I mean, what's really great about the place we're at, and what we're able to do with hemp is, THC is just one of the molecules that cannabis produces. So, for the hemp people, it's like, okay, you can have your THC, but we can still play with everything else. And that's what's been really another really fun thing about it, is the genetics that have gone into creating stable genetics that have been created to not go above that 0.3% THC, while also being able to amplify some of the other cannabinoids or terpene profiles or fats and lipids, flavonoids, all the other things that can be produced and extracted from this plant. I've been fortunate to meet some really fantastic terpene extraction folks. Some value that may bring, just even on its own, is pretty interesting molecules that are produced. So, the other cannabinoids, the CBG, the CBN, it's really cool. We're able to explore so much, even with the hemp genetics that we have today, and some of these other benefits that come out of it outside of CBD. And I'll read this one here. Is the existence of the endocannabinoid system evidence of humanity's use of cannabis throughout our evolution as a species?
William, I think you're the kind of guy I'd like to sit down and have a conversation with, William.
Biological evolution. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on evolution, but I do believe in it. And I've actually, so I wrote a book, and it's not released yet, but it'll come out soon, and you guys will hear about that. And I started to really study the history of just cannabis, and started to learn how other plants actually have cannabinoids. And at one point back in evolutionary time in India, there were other plants that actually had higher levels of THC than cannabis plant itself. But to answer your question, the appearance and the existence of this endocannabinoid system, even though we haven't, when I endocannabinoid system, and even though we've never been taught, I think it's obviously always been there. And the use of cannabis throughout history, I mean, I've read so many uses and so many healing mechanisms that have just amazed me. And I wish there were more details, and I wish there was internet back then so that we could get more of these details. But this is an opinionated question. I don't have evidence, but sorry. But do I think that, the existence is allowed, is proof that cannabis, has been evident and has actually caused our bodies to naturally react to cannabis? Yes, absolutely. Because I think in historic times, I mean, not just using cannabis, but utilizing plants was just part of,
so we had to do
healing. That's all there was, right? And I love technology, and I love modern medicine, and I love what we're able to do. But if we could take 10 steps back and kind of learn from our history, we'll understand more. Probably find more than just the endocannabinoid system, which is like fairly new to the medical world. That's a great question, and I'm actually would love to look more into that myself.
Yeah, and there's it also, their cannabinoids do get produced by other plants outside of the Cannabiaceae family, and so they've been in our environment for a while. And I'm no expert either, but just from the research I've just done on my own and listened and reviewed, and I always try to push on this too, is that cannabis is not the only plant out there. There's just so much life and amazing things that we gain every day and lose every day on this world, and in the plant kingdom and the flora and fauna that exist out there. So, there's, and not to even mention, going into our fungal kingdoms and the bacterias and other life forms that, I think our bodies are also adapted to being able to utilize in beneficial ways.
Subject that, I had one class when I was at Eastern Kentucky University. That's a story within itself. But, I had one class on biological evolution, and I just don't feel like we get to think about that enough.
I did too. It's
yeah,
so good.
we've obviously adapted to who we are today, substance that we've utilized over time. So I love to think of that, and I love that question. Thank you for that, William.
So I'll also ask this question here. How can we get our primary care physicians more educated on CBD? Mine is fine with me using it, but he can't guide me.
Can you guys hear me? That's actually kind of been the biggest struggle for me. Obviously wanting to reach out to my community and give them science that, doesn't really exist as of yet. And a lot of our physicians, I mean, they are backed by scientific evidence, right? And they work for groups and hospitals and organizations that give them FDA approved drugs, because we know those drugs have gone through rigorous processes. So how can you go to your doctor and say, hey, I want CBD, this guy's a great farmer, and I know they extract really well, and I want to use that for my fibromyalgia instead of these medications you're giving me. And what is your doctor supposed to say? Right. There are a few things that as a scientific community, we're trying to do some things with some universities and create classes. There are a lot of online courses. It's really up to the physician as of right now. I think as the laws start to ease up, it'll really almost force physicians, pharmacists, and scientists themselves to want to start, becoming more educated, because there is now a lot of information out there. I feel like obviously online it's hard to tell what's real versus what's not. So, I'm trying to do my part in getting different associations like American Medical Association, American Pharmacy Association, those associations in different colleges and universities to at least host CEA programs and studies and host lectures. I recently did a lecture at Vanderbilt, and that was particularly for postdocs and graduate students. And, it's a lot of it is educating those that are next in line as well, because a lot of physicians today, unfortunately, are set in their ways, right? So, but the doctors that are in medical school now, I mean, I am seeing that a lot of them are, taking the time to become more accepted and become more educated. So, there are different programs out there, and that's developing in process. But I think it does come down to the physicians. I mean, if they want to be more educated on it or not, because they're obviously not required to be.
So the next question here I see is, what about CBD for pets? Could it help pets with medical issues as well?
So you've seen a lot of people using it for pets, right? Well,
yeah. And my understanding is that canines and felines have endocannabinoid systems as well. So the thought is that they would probably benefit as well from CBD or cannabinoid compounds.
Yeah, I mean, there's some research there. It's obviously not as rapid as the human research, but tons of anecdotal stories, helping pets with, I mean, the same things that we get, right? Like pain, seizures, recovering faster post-surgery, just all kinds. I've seen people try CBD on their pets and it work, and I totally think it's worth a shot. Especially if you're into trying to give your dog a more holistic path, and it's not something that they'd need surgery on or whatever, but definitely have seen benefits on that side of it as well.
I always encourage people just to remember that your pets are usually smaller than you are, so they may not need the same dosage, if there is a dosage, and always, just like yourself, start out light and just see what you get from that.
Yeah, I think most people are just, putting drops into their dog's water. There are, all kinds. I think there's a whole CBD section now at PetSmart.
Yeah.
There's chewables and CBD bones, and I guess again, it depends on the issue. I would go more of the tincture route if you have a dog that like has seizures or has a particular issue. But for maintenance, I think I would give my dog CBD for sure.
And just to touch back on one of your points on the last question about how do we get our physicians a little more into understanding endocannabinoid system, and it brings me to recently, this last legislative session, one of the medical marijuana bills, or what's basically a commission that would be set up, which would have some pretty would be put together by people who are pretty influenced on the medical side, physicians and pharmacists, and knowing that either they do know or they don't know, or whatever it is, that if they're the ones putting policy together for a medical program, that we would have some ability to know what information they are coming across, how they're coming up with their decisions. And I hope people like myself and Dr. Annabelle, could be involved in some of that, because we have some really great, smart people in the industry. We have some great processors in our state as well. We've got people doing it the right way, and good facilities. We have, just like in any state, there's always going to be people trying to do it right, other people who are just really enthusiastic and want to help people, and you got to start somewhere. So we just have a really unique opportunity, I think, going forward in Tennessee on putting something meaningful together that can kind of be a little more generalized. The medical route, there needs to be a place for that. I personally feel like there should be some place for recreational use, and I think there's a place for all of it. The research to be allowed to move forward, so it's it just brings up the education part that I hope gets brought up with the people who make decisions, and that's goes back to just encouraging your representatives to do the same. And
Totally agree.
Asking, as a licensed local hemp grower, what's the best way to process flower for safe consumption medically, in your opinion?
I'll let you take that one, Will.
Okay. Well, let's see. So you're a licensed grower, and if you're looking for medical ways, so there's a number of ways to start out. What I would do is, if you have your own flowers, to get it tested first, get an idea of what kind of potency exists in there. For medical, if you're talking about medical, then I would get a full panel done on your raw material. Is there any pesticides? Is there any heavy metals? Is there yeast, molds, any residuals, and a potency? And that way, that'll help you get a good idea of how to gauge your process and then your formulation. Secondly, a popular way of extraction is through ethanol. Some people use CO2. Some people can just use a basic oil. If you're for your own personal use, using a butter or a fat. Cannabinoids are fat soluble, I believe, technically. So if you are using that extract to then go into a fat product, you can, that's a good way to have another liquid that you can kind of formulate and either concentrate into or dilute with. And from there, once you have made your product, whatever it may be, then I would take a sample of that product that's a homogeneous representative sample, that then I would send that to a lab and get a final idea of your potency and any residual solvents that may be on it. So that's a big one for our industry, since there is a lot of different ways to apply solvents or hydrocarbons for extraction processes. And, when you're going through a process like that, certain things could get bound to other molecules, and you may not know how it all turns out in the final product and the efficacy of it, or if something's become better or worse. So I always encourage people to really do their research and understand, some of that fun, simple chemistry that we hopefully all learned in middle and high school, and to get your product tested if you're really concerned about medical ways. And then the next part would be, using a product that's doesn't necessarily have to be organic, but just know what you're using and the ingredients and the what you're using as a basis to formulate or do your extraction from, and the profiles. So that's what I would say, and that's kind of the fun. The other part of this and the fun and joy that I have with growing is actually growing the plant, and I think there's a lot of health benefits for people just in that part of it. That's another really neat thing that this program that we've had in our state has allowed people to do, is actually just grow a cannabis plant in their backyard and just watch it grow for 4 months or 6 months, and then watch it turn into this flower and produce all these amazing things, and then take that flower and create something even more special that can help people.
Absolutely. I mean, well, you're a green thumb, so I guess that's easy for you to say.
Yeah, or know someone who does it really well. Support your local grower.
Just to add to that as well, William. I mean, like, I don't know a ton about. I mean, I think I know enough to be dangerous about processing and growing and all that. But if you're talking about the medical route, I mean, consistency is the biggest thing, right? I mean, before you even get to what's this product going to be, you can create, I mean, all kinds of products, right? But what is that flower? What's in it? How safe is it? How did you do it? And can you repeat it? Right. So these are the things that I think, when someone like me goes to legislation and wants to really advocate for the differences that cannabis has over any other drug, and understanding that it's a plant and the variability of it can be very beneficial, we need to develop thresholds, and we need to show certain consistencies in order for us to really be able to consider it anything medical. So, just like Will said, like, just understand what you have, and then, and then start fixing. If there are things in your certificates that you shouldn't have, then you need to get that right, and then start to develop it consistently.
And I would say, expand a little bit on what you said to the beginning, is knowing what final product it is you want to make and what ailment you might be trying to focus on. If it's,
Absolutely.
Is this something that is, some people benefit from smoking, but smoking is bad for your lungs, whatever it is you're smoking. Is it something that you need to go sublingually, like a tincture, and that's the best form? But if you're with someone who may not be able to swallow or eat, then you might have other forms that you need to create for the application. I don't know if that's the right word, but you need to know where it's going, how it's going, and how it's going to be used by whoever you're trying to affect.
Absolutely. So if there's any more questions, I'd suggest you type it really fast and put it in the comments. I think, Will, that we had planned on kind of coming on and just introducing ourselves to the community and the work that we're doing. And I really thank everybody for having us. It's really a joy to do this alongside Will, because I mean it's super unique to be with somebody that's such a professional in his space and that has owned his part of this industry, and so that people can see that there's so many angles and so many different possibilities, and I mean, from jobs to there's just so many different expertise within this industry. So I personally just want to thank you, Kathleen, for having us, and the Bellevue community for tuning in. It's always fun to do something at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say the same. Always a joy to speak with you, Dr. Annabelle, and Kathleen. Thanks for reaching out to do this segment. And it's for me, it's great. It's right here in my hometown in Bellevue, and love this area. And really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, with that, if there aren't any final questions, should we sign off for the evening? And what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Dr. Annabelle? I know there's been some flash ups here on the screen of maybe some websites or emails, but if people wanted to find out more about your upcoming book or anything like that.
Yeah, so that's my website. It flashed, and I recently became Dr. Annabelle Morgan. So if you Google me, it's mostly Dr. Annabelle Manalo. Manalo, Manalo. But from that website, you'll find socials and all that good stuff. And I'm very responsive. So, if you guys have any further questions, you can always reach out.
Awesome. Well, with that, we'll say good night to the Bellevue community. And thanks again, Annabelle and Kathleen. And
thank you, Will. Thank you, Mike. Everyone.
Yeah. Y'all have a good night. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good night, guys.